Hello students, how are you all? Are you fine? Okay, are you ready to take the class with the help of next topic? Dear students, in previous class we have discussed about the assessment of partnership firm. You know, partnership firm is a such types of business which is run by two or more than two persons under the evidence of instrument. Under the evidence of instrument means the partnership firm as a written documents, the partnership firm as a written deed. So dear students, in the case of partnership firm, we have discussed about the book profit, we have discussed about the how to compute the tax liability as well as in total income of partnership firm. So dear friends, dear students, it is my humble submission before all of you. I am happy to share with you with the help of with the nice and positive cooperation of all of you. I am going to discuss the next topic, new topic regarding to the deduction and collection of taxes at sources. So now I Dr. Lal Babu Jaiswal, Assistant Professor from Faculty of Commerce, Banaras University, Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh, India. Now I am going to discuss the deduction and collection of tax at sources, TDS and TCS. So dear students, what do you mean by the TDS? Tax deduction at sources. TDS or tax deducted at sources is a income tax reduced from the money paid at the time of making a specified payment such as rent, commission, professional fees, salary, interest, etc. This is the definition of the TDS. What do you mean by the TCS? Tax collection at sources. Tax collected at sources, TCS, is the tax collected by the seller from the buyer on sale, so that it can be deposited with the tax authority. Section 206C of the Income Tax Act governs the goods on which the seller has to collect tax from the buyers. So we can say in simple word, TDS is computed on the earned income, but TCS is computed on the volume of sale proceeds. So dear students, so TDS and TCS is very important component, and it is required to deposit to government if it is deducted at the sources. So dear students, it is my humble submission. This slide regarding to the difference between TDS and TCS. On the basis of limit parameters, TDS purchase of goods and services, and TCS means sale of goods and services. In the case of TDS, at the time of purchase of goods, at the time of purchase of sales, the component which is charged is called the TDS. But at the time of the sale of goods and services, the component is TCS is included. On the basis of transaction covered parameter, rent, commission, interest, salary, brokerage and more are included under the TDS. But under the TCS, products, car, tandu leaf, minerals, liquor, timber, scrap, etc. are included under the TDS. Time of deduction. Under the parameter of time of deduction, when payment is due or made, whichever comes sooner. Dear students, when payment is due or when payment is made, whichever comes earlier will be covered under the umbrella of the TDS. But under the case of TCS, the TCS refers only at the time of sale. Dear students, due dates. In the case of TDS, the TDS due date will be 7th day of the next month except March. It is 30th of the April of the next financial year. So dear student, this is the date of the due dates parameter on the basis of due dates, then this due date will be required to know. In the case of TCS, 7th of next month except March, it is the 7th of April of next financial year. The returns have to submitted quarterly. Dear students, on the basis of parameter of the person responsible. So dear student, individual or company making the payment. Dear students, individual or company making the payment is responsible to deposit the amount of tax in tax to government account. But in the case of TCS, individual or business selling the goods and services is required or responsible to deposit the amount of tax to government. So dear students, some of the income source that qualify for TDS. This slide represent these types of incomes qualifies under the head of salary, and we can say in other words, on these types of income sources the TDS is required to compute, the TDS is required to deduct. First, income from salary. Dear student, income from salary is under the head of the TDS. Dear student, amount under the LIC, the amount which is received from the LIC, Life Insurance Corporation, or the amount which is received as a back interest, or the amount which is received as a brokerage, commission payment, compensation on acquiring immovable property, contract payments, deemed dividend, insurance commission, interest apart from interest on securities, payment of rent, remuneration paid to director of a company, transfer of immovable property, winning from games like a crossword puzzle, card, lottery, etc. are related to the qualifying incomes under the head of TDS. Dear student, we know income from salary is the first head of the total income. This income is undercovered of the tax deduction at sources. Amount under the LIC, Life Insurance Corporation of India, is also covered under the head of the TDS. Bank interest means such types of interest which is received by depositor on the basis of saving account, fixed deposit account, term deposit account, recurring account, and other accounts are included under the head of the TDS. Brokerage or commission, such types of brokerage or commission which is derived on the basis of selling of the goods, purchasing of the goods, or selling or purchasing of the services, or other things which is transferred or due to transfer is covered under the head of brokerage or commission. Commission payment is also included under the head of the TDS. Commission payment means such types of commission payment which is derived, which is based on the transaction of the business goods. Compensation on acquiring of immovable property. If any compensation which is received for the getting the immovable property or asset is covered under the head of the TDS. Contractor payments is also covered under the head of the TDS. Contractor payment is such types of payment which is based on the contract agreement, which is based on the contract business, which is based on the 44ADA. Deemed dividend is the dividend which is not received but it is considered as an income. Deemed dividend is such types of dividend which is on the name of other person but included in the name of another person. So this income is called deemed dividend. Deemed dividend is also under the head of TDS. So dear students, winning from lottery, card games, puzzles, remuneration to directors, rent payment, rent apart from interest on security, these are the sources of the income which are covered under the head of the TDS. So dear students, next is the TDS point, is very important point, income from salary. Dear student, income from salary. Salary income is the such types of income. Salary income is the those types of income which is based on the relationship as a employer and employee. ये रिश्ता क्या कहलाता है? Such types of relation is called the employer and employee relation. This is income from the salary. Under the income from the salary, the TDS is this section 192 is very important. On the basis of such types of section, the TDS is deducted by the employer. Employer is a person who deduct the amount of tax and deposit to government account, and the amount which is deducted by the employer will be treated as a TDS. Dear student, this section costs an obligation on every person responsible for paying any income chargeable to tax under the head salary to deduct income tax at the time of payment on the amount payable. So dear student, section 192 is very important and prominent TDS section. Dear student, manner of deduction of tax. What are the manner of deduction of tax? Such income tax has to be calculated at average rate of income tax computed on the basis of rate in force in relevant financial year in which the payment is made on the estimated total income of the assessee, like as the advance payment of the tax. Section 211. The income from the salary which is started from this year 1st April 2024 and is 31st March 2025 on the basis of such types of income tax is computed. Tax is calculated on the basis of average, and such types of average basis will be deducted by the employer and deposited by the employer to the government account. Dear student, in this case, there are two types of regime. At the time of computation of the tax liability, there are two types of regime. First, the regime which is called the optional tax regime, which is also called the old tax regime, but the regime which is called the default tax regime, new tax regime. So dear students, average rate of income tax means the rate arrived at by dividing the amount of income tax calculated on the total income by such types of way. Dear students, a deductor means employer. Employer being an employer has to seek information for each of the employees having income under section 192 regarding their intended tax regime, and each such employee would intimate the same to the deductor, and such types of deductor is required to deposit the amount of tax which has been deducted on the income of the employee. Section 192. Dear students, section 193. Section 193 is related to the interest on securities. Security means such types of component, such types of instruments, such types of financial instruments, such types of financial avenues which is purchased, which is taken by the investor on the basis of getting some profit, and this profit is called interest. In interest, the amount which is received by the investor on the basis of getting the securities is called the interest on securities, and interest on security income is required to deduct the amount of tax. Section 193. Dear students, person responsible for deduction of tax at sources. This section costs. Section 193 cost responsibility on every person responsible for paying to resident any income by way of interest on securities. Dear students, meaning of interest on security is given under section 2, subsection 28b. Interest on security means interest on any security of central government or state government. Interest on debenture or other security for money issued by or on behalf of a local authority or a company or a corporation established by a central or state Provisional Act. So dear students, these are the meaning of the interest on security. Dear students, rate of TDS. Rate of TDS means the rate of TDS at which the tax is deductible under section 193 is 10%. 193 is 10%. Dear students, this is the 10% interest on security. On interest on security, TDS is deducted at the rate of 10% of the interest amount. Dear student, what is the time of tax deducted at sources? Dear student, tax should be deducted at the time of credit of such income to the account of pay or at the time of payment thereof in cash or by issue of a check or draft or by any other mode whichever is earlier. Dear student, this is the time of TDS. Second one, next one is non-applicability of TDS under section 193. Dear student, there are some types of securities, there are some types of investment avenues or some types of investment alternatives on which if any interest is derived by the investor, the tax is not applicable to deduct. Under this, on national development bond, tax is not required to deduct. TDS is not required to deduct. On 7% nation savings certificate, fourth issue is not required to deduct the volume of the tax. On the debenture issued by any institution or authority or any public sector company or any cooperative society, including a cooperative land mortgage bank or cooperative land development bank as notified by the central government, is not required to the amount of tax required to tax deducted. So dear students, the next slide presents the fourth point is related to the such types of investment avenue on which tax is not deducted on any security of central government or state government. Dear student, on any debenture whether listed or not listed or recognized stock exchange issued by the company in which the public are substantially interested to the resident individual HUF. However, these interests are not under the category of TDS, but the interest should be paid by a company by an account pay check. If it is not paid by the account pay check, so then TDS is required to deduct. Second one is the amount of such interest or aggregate thereof paid or likely to be paid during the financial year by a company in a such resident individual or HUF should not exceed 5,000 rupees. So it is very important point. The TDS volume is capping the not deducted the amount of TDS. The interest volume is not exceed 5,000. Point number 6 is on security to Life Insurance Corporation, General Insurance Corporation, subsidiary of GIC or any other insurer provided the security are owned by them or. Second one is they have the full beneficiary interest in such security. Dear student, this security interest, this security bonus or benefit is not required to deduct the TDS. Dear students, section 194A is related to the interest other than interest on security. Dear student, there are some types of interest, there are some types of amount of the profit regarding to the interest which is derived by the investor on the basis of other than securities. And if any amount, any income, if any interest is derived by the investor other than the investment or security avenue, these are also required to tax deduct at under the section 194A. Dear student, the rate of TDS in this case is 10%. Rate of TDS in this case is 10%. Dear students, in both types of cases, non-corporate, resident, assessee and domestic company. Dear students, in this section 194A, this section applies only the interest other than interest on security, only the interest other than securities. other than securities, मतलब interest on security, other than interest on security, credited or paid by the assessee other than the individual or Hindu undivided family. However, an individual or Hindu undivided family whose total sales, gross receipt or turnover from the business or profession carried on by him exceed rupees 1 crore in case of business and rupees 50 lakh in case of profession during the immediately preceding financial year is liable to deduct tax at sources under this section. So dear friends, dear students, this is a very important topic. This is a very important matter at the time of TDS section under section 194A. So dear students, there are some types of situation where the 194A is not applied. First, no deduction of tax shall be made in the following cases: if the aggregate amount of interest paid or credited during the financial year does not exceed rupees 5,000. This limit is 40,000 where the payer is. This limit is 40,000 where the payer is banking company, a cooperative society engaged in the banking business, and post office, and interest is credited or paid in respect of any deposit under the notified scheme. In respect of above, point number 1 banking company, point number 2 cooperative society, point number 3 post office, the limit rupees 50,000 in the case of payee being a senior citizen. So we can say in the case of senior citizen on rupees 50,000 tax is not deducted, TDS is not applied. This slide represent the such types of component and such types of provision where the section 194A is not applied. Dear students, payment to contractor and subcontractor, section 194C, applicable of TDS under section 194C. 194C is related to the such types of business which is covered under 44 ADA. Dear students, this section 194C provides for deduction of tax at sources from the payment made resident contractor and subcontractor under the contract business. Dear students, tax has to be deducted at the source under section 194C by any person responsible for paying any sum to resident contractor on for carrying out any work, including supply of labor for carrying out any work, in pursuance of the contract between the contractor and the central government, any local authority, any statutory corporation, any company, any cooperative society, etc. So dear students, in the case of individual HUF as subcontractor, TDS rate is 1%. In the case of other than individual HUF contractor, the TDS rate is 2%. Contractor, dear students, contractor in transport business, if PAN is furnished, so tax is not deducted, it is not deducted. Subcontractor in the transport business, if PAN is furnished, so TDS is not required to deduct. So dear students, rate of TDS, the rate of TDS under section 194C on the payment to contractor would be 1% where the payee is an individual or HUF, and 2% in respect of other payee. 2% in respect of other payee. The same rate of the TDS would be applied for both contractors and subcontractors. Dear student, in the case of individual and HUF, the rate of TDS is 1%. Other than individual HUF contractor, the rate of TDS is 2%. In the case of contractor transport business, the PAN is furnished 10 per nil. In the case of subcontractor in transport business, if PAN is furnished, the TDS is at nil. So, dear student, it is my humble submission regarding before all of you, the TDS rate under section 194C is applied regarding to the contract business. Dear students, section 194H, commission on brokerage. Dear student, brokerage is some part of the amount. Brokerage is some part of the component which is given by a person to another on the basis of performing sub-services and sub-transferring of the goods. Dear student, any person other than an individual or HUF who is responsible for paying any income by way of commission other than insurance commission or brokerage to a resident shall be deduct income tax under the rate of 5%. So this is the provision of section 194H. Dear students, rent, section 194I, applicability and rate of the TDS. Rent is such types of component, rent is such types of amount, rent is such types of income which is derived by the owner of house property, the owner of a house property from its tenant. Dear students, any person other than individual HUF who is responsible for paying to resident any income by way of rent is liable to deduct tax at sources. However, an individual or HUF whose total sales gross asset or turnover from the business or profession carried on by him exceed ₹1 crore in case of business and ₹50 lakh in case of profession during the financial year immediately preceding financial year in the such in which the rent is credited to or paid is liable to deduct at the source at the rate of prescribed rules. So dear student, rate of TDS is 2%. Rate of TDS is 2% in respect of rent of our plant and machinery or equipment. In the case of 10%, the rate of TDS in the case of 10% in respect of other than rental payments, that is rent from use of any land, building, including factory building or land appertaining to building, including factory building or furniture factory, etc. In the case of TDS, the TDS will be 10%. Dear student, 10% will be TDS. Dear students, section 194J. Section 194J is related to the fee for professional or technical services. Dear students, applicability and rates of the TDS. In this case, applicability and rate of TDS will be every person other than an individual or HUF who is responsible for paying to a resident or any sum by way of fee or professional services, fee or technical services, any remuneration or fee, commission by way whatever name card other than those on which TDS is deductible under section 192 to director of a company or royalty or non-compete fee referred in section 28 VA. So under this, the rate of TDS will be applicable at the rate of given, and such types of applicability under section 194J will be 10% of the rate. So in this case, with the help of the today discussion and today lecture of the TDS is very important component and is required to deduct by an employer by the paying of the income by any person or any types of individual, HUF or corporate society if any income is derived on the basis of giving any services, a transfer of goods. So the TDS is required to calculate, the TDS is required to deduct, and it should be deposited to the government account by the employer or by the deductor. So with the help of these types of lecture, I am able to say you got each and every point regarding to tax deduction and tax collection at sources, section 192, 193, 194, 192A, 194I, J and many other deduction sections. So thanks to each and everyone for your nice cooperation, for the listening. I will meet you with the help of the next chapter under the income tax law and practice. So again, thanks to each and everyone. Thanks to one and all.